Alrighty, welcome. Ooh, hopefully the sounds worked out now. Alrighty, welcome to art. Yes. Today we're going to be art. We're going to start looking at a whole bunch of basic aspects of figures, and one of the most obvious places to start with any figure is its skeleton. So we're going to be doing a set of basic exercises with skeletons. I'm going to do three 5-minute sketches, and then I'm going to do one 15-minute grand sketch to finish things off. So without too much further ado, let's break up our paper here. It's all going to happen. Woo! It's all going to happen in that space, apparently. Yep. And away we go. Hopefully it all goes well. Fingers crossed. We're going to start the timer. Forgot about that. Think. So the first one is obviously going to be a skull. You couldn't start, and I'm of course copying from reference here, but don't want to reveal my references for sake of copyright, blah, blah, blah. Skulls are awesome. They're huge fun to do. Most people actually enjoy doing skulls. Some people don't enjoy doing human skulls, but pretty much everybody enjoys doing some sort of animal. The trick to doing any sort of bone is to starting to have some sort of basic grasp of the thing's anatomy. So here I'm trying to put in these basic parts of the eye, of the occipital area. I used to know what this was called. And piece by piece, I'm just trying to draw some texture and shape into this image. There we go. I also don't want to use too much time. I never actually started the timer. That's okay, guys. We got a timer right there. It's only been running a minute, so I'll stop at 4 on there. All right. Back at it. Don't want to lose any of that valuable time. Coming around here into the sort of tooth area. I don't have time here really to get too particular about like the intricacies of scale and things. I just try to make things look as good as possible. Some lines. So one of the things is you want to choose different techniques for different lines. Some lines you want sharper and more confident. You got to figure out how your strokes actually turn into each of the different things that you're doing on the page. Think carefully about it. Teeth are so tricky. Oh man. It's so easy to overdo teeth in relation to the rest of your image. And that's, I think, the number one way to come at teeth is to try and think about not creating this like dominating form and just moving on and trying to approach other parts of your art, using them as like a launch pad for doing the rest of the jaw, as opposed to just getting caught into drawing each tooth. A lot of people, I mean, repetition and the exploitation of repetition is just a standard way to how you accomplish art. But that also leaves people an opportunity to get really carried away and to perform far too much repetition and not focus on actually developing the eye to page art skills that you just kind of need at a certain point. So as you can see, starting to get this jaw developed. This is by no means a perfect piece, and this is way too aggressive on this side here, so I'm just going to cheat a little and clean it up. Forgive me. I find it quite tricky not being able to manipulate the page quite how I would want, but at the very least we've got some sort of respectable skull looking thing coming in, and I got another 2 minutes to play with here. So come in over here, try and get some of that basic shading in. Whenever I'm not feeling confident, that's often when I'll just go and I'll work on some peripheral details that I'm pretty sure I can get in no problem, right? Yeah. You toss in some of these edge sketches. It looks good. It feels good to accomplish. And it will contribute to your overall product in the end. How am I going to situate this most important sections of the face here? So I really want my And I want to think about the ratios that are going to be the most important to me. And I think ultimately I just want my whole sort of teeth set up down here to relate really smoothly into my sort of nose setup, and then my eyes need to not be too horribly out of whack. Meanwhile, these cheek thingies, my nose should reach through, which means it should come out like that and that. So that seems like a little bit better on the nose front there. And now, of course, we can start thinking. I'm going to undershoot on the eyes if I can. Makes them a little small to start with, but it gives me room to sort of flesh out that bone with later. And there we go. That's pretty good. I am running out of time. I'm down to my last sort of minute or so. So I'm going to start by bringing in some of these lowlights. Let's just focus on trying to get some of these basic shapes and edges pronounced. And trying to make sure that the dark bits are dark and the lighter bits are lighter. The skull, for example, is shot very much to the right side, so we're going to get heavy on the dark over there, and on the left side I'm going to use this much lighter sort of touch to bring in a little bit of detail. What's cool is I'm using some sort of nifty techniques. So lots going on here. Working under pressure should really stop any second now. I'm doing a classic kid thing of pushing too hard, but I'm using, I think it's kind of cool, I'm using the flatness of this over here to sort of define the sharpness of the edge, so that when I come over and I do my good stuff over here, I've got this beautiful, lovely, sharp, sort of bladed point to deal with here. That's really where I should cut it. Done pretty good. Teeth. Mid, but not fantastic. Yeah, I can't resist. Okay, gotta stop, gotta move on. 534 is way more than it should be. 3, 2, 1, thank you. Moving on to number 2. This is actually going to be another skull. I'm going to try and use what I've learned in the first skull. This is a fetal skull, so we have different proportions and a different sort of texture to the overall skull shape, which I think is interesting to draw. And also, you know, it's supposed to just try to like mash out the exact same sorts of pen. You can't get rid of that. Sorts of skull over and over again. You can branch out, try. There's a ton of different varieties of skull, human and otherwise, and all of them are really worthwhile to try and explore and to draw. One of the things we do have to be aware of is, of course, that when we're doing skulls, these skulls belong to people or things or objects or stuff, and so this is always something that we should keep an eye on and be respectful of. How do you be respectful of art in these cases? I can kind of hear some people asking. The real trick is to think about what the subject matter means to the people to whom it should be important to, and how you and the people in your life give respect to subject matter that is important. Ultimately, you just have your own sort of standards that you have to approach and live with. We don't have a standardized way of doing this. Maybe we should, but we don't. So yeah, that's kind of where you have to be. Make sure that you're treating the objects of another culture or group with the same sort of respect you would want them to treat yours, is kind of the general deal. Having done that chitter chatter, let's get back into drawing this crazy skull. It is really, really beautiful and amazing. But it's also just so crazy to see sort of what happens to bone when it's put in these sorts of conditions. Child skulls are very different from adult skulls, obviously due to shape. But there's been huge sort of like distortion to the shape of the overall skull here, due just to the very fact that the child's bones are just that much more malleable. Yes, that's a good word. The child's bones are just that much more malleable. So when you have a child's skull, they distort when they dry. Of course, one of the reasons we have to be concerned about these things and we have to think about them is obviously this could have been a person, unfortunately did not make it. So we are in this very privileged position to be here, able to draw this. And while we might hope that our parts be used in such similar ways, obviously we would never be in such a position to find out. So I really enjoy drawing this sort of stuff. And I also think that the weight is important. It's important to not just spend your time drawing only art that is aimed at entertainment or just sort of making you happy or allowing you to explore your own things. You sometimes have to branch out and do things that are more challenging and more provocative for yourself, not for some greater challenge to society. Don't worry, there's lots of people out there doing that for you already. They've got it covered. So if you want to join their ranks, there's definitely ways for you to do that, but I don't think it should be a focus of your art in the stage of development, as they say. Here I am just trying to add more and more detail. This is a really, really fascinating skull, and I'm just trying to make sure all the ways in which it is unique and special are preserved in my drawing as best as I can do. If you're copying this and you're trying your hardest and it's still not coming out great, don't feel bad. You're not disrespecting a culture by failing to accurately draw their thing the first time. What's important is, again, how you approach it and what you do with a finished piece of art when it's done, right? Maybe don't go off showing it around if you do a really poor job on something like this. That's okay. As always, take into account the people and the reactions that you get as you're doing things. Try to figure it out for yourself. You guys are smart. So I'm just trying to make it more and more accurate. Add more and more detail. Just find more and more places in which it can be improved. But I am unfortunately out of time. That's a pretty solid run for our fetal skull. Next up, we've got chest bones. Bones of the chest. So this is a good exercise to do every now and then. It's quite different from the other ones because here we were trying to be as accurate as possible and make nice pictures. Here, this is much more of a medical diagram. It's got all the labels and everything in it. You can look these up, just look up bones of the chest or something, and you get all these labels. What we're using it for, however, is just trying to make our chest plate as realistic as possible here as we practice our bones. Also to get us familiar with some of the very familiar bones of the chest. So for example, these are the clavicles coming off here. Clavicle. Everybody knows about the spine. So this is like the chest plate, and then behind it, we actually have sections of spine coming off. Yeah, there we are. That's pretty good. Now, over here, I'm going to make the contact point for our very first rib section, which is going to make contact here underneath the clavicle. And we gotta connect it up, and away we go. Yes. So these sorts of exercises are really good to do just to start working on connecting these angles and things properly. People aren't sure how to do this a lot of the time. The sad answer, like so many other things in life, is that you just have to practice. It's hard. You get used to it. It looks better over time. So ribs, they kind of expand as you go piece by piece. This expansion can be a little tricky. Oof, there we go. Not bad. And again, I'm just trying to get it as good as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. It'd be nice if, it just looked like a good old rack of ribs. That's all I'm looking for here. Adding these joint thingies again. We got these 7 ribs here. I'm down into my scapula. I'm making sure that all of my connecting points are actually right. The first 5 ribs are the easiest because they're straight. So I've done 2. Now I can do 3. And we're in safe zone again, so we can come up and go in for something like that. And then, yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that. Make a contact point for it. Try the same trick on the other side. Heck, at this point, I might even try and... Yeah, there we go. Ooh. Highlights and everything. So each rib for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Trying to make sure I'm in the right position in the scapula. You don't want to mess that up. Come around on along. Up for now. Again, trying to keep an eye on my overall position. You're juggling all these different things in art, which is one of the things that I find enjoyable about it, but I can understand it can get a little stressful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th rib over here. This is the last one that sticks right in. It looks like my ribs should be coming down more. I'm actually going to try and overcorrect right now for that, even though it's not going to look fantastic in the final. It's important here just because it's a learning exercise. And I want to get it right. I want to try and start getting these pieces into place. Over time, I might come in and fix the back of that. But for now, I'm just going to try and tackle this next challenging piece of rib. I never started that, but fortunately, 5, 10. I imagine I'm starting to run out of time on this thing. If only I was better at actually keeping my timer correct. So I have 2 last points for connection here. And the first of them is just a top sweep like that and a top sweep like that, but it is not as simple as it comes down and into the piece because it breaks off like that and then gives us an additional rib. Mirroring this on the other side is going to be troublesome for me, but I will do my best like that. Okay. I always struggle with these ribs down here. So if I come down here, give myself lots of space, and come up, then this forms the sort of base of the rib that you can sort of grab and feel. I'm finally in the position where I feel comfortable tossing in that little chunk of spine at the back there. And then these bottom ribs, I just want to connect everything. Just want it to be perfect, okay? That's all I ask. Is it too much? Yes. Yes, it's always too much. It's always too much. Here I just don't want to lose track of which rib I'm on. No. I can do this. They all come in. So this one has separation here and here and here. So this is usually a sign that it's time to move on. But I'm so close. He lied. One, two, three. So there has to be a rib there. And then there has to be a rib there. And then down here, that links off like that, links off like that, links off like that. So that means 1, 2, 3 gaps. 1, 2, 3 gaps. And then the bridge to the top one. 1, 2, 3, 4 gaps. And then the bridge to the top one. 1, 2, 3. So somehow I've messed up my number of ribs. Alright, that's sad. So this is exactly why we do this sort of exercise, so you can get better at this. At this point, I'm just going to cut it and move on. We've done some pretty good work, so you can't win them all. Disappointing. So this is just a little sad and wrong. I have to go back and fix that. Clearly, I should do this exercise more. Last but not least, and this time, hopefully, we actually, we do set the timer properly, and away we go. Trying to draw. So this is a complete sight. We have an actual skeleton to look at. We have skull and some breast cage and just a bunch of other stuff, and we're just going to try and render it as honestly and as accurately as we can. Piece by piece. Starting obviously with the skull over here, just trying to get its position. It's very distinctive, and it's very distinctive shape. Right, I got too wide with that. It's much easier to, of course, fix than getting the other problem going the other way. Very sharp, distinct cheekbone here. And this really cool shadow that's being shed on the edge of the face. We, of course, over here have the jawbone starting to emerge. Quite get the size and shape right there. And then the teeth, the jaws are almost seems to be like off at an angle. And then the teeth, of course, block in like so. Just going to put a hint of them in for now for aforementioned reasons. Come around. Poor guy's jaw is not quite as strong as it should be, or lady, I'm not sure. No clue. Come around, toss in a bit more vertebra. I'm not going to worry too much about the outside right now, just in case I've duffed it up. The angle of the skull is kind of crazy. So I think there is some squishing going on, but I will try to continue with my clean lines. Here we have some rib cage coming out. And then this one is very distinctive. Now, having done our rib cage, we know that this is quite clearly clavicle. Yeah. Round and round about like so. Want a confidence boost, so I go and do a little bit of shading. Alright, come back into it. So see, one of the nice things about pausing is it often gives you a perspective on something you might have missed. And this bone is quite important here, so I think I'll try and knot it in right now. Curve it off, I got a little too excited, and then put in the next piece. Of course, you gotta be super careful with these perspective joints, because if you do it wrong, then you end up, I don't want to be dropping random lines in here. Then you end up doing silly things. So here, here, and I think here, and then there, and that gets me something somewhat accurate. See, I'm sure I've already messed up a bunch of different places, but I'm just trying to get some basic shapes in. Hand comes like across. I think parts of this are a wrist, which is kind of crazy because the hand comes across from this shoulder over here. I'm going to just try and make the top of the shoulder joint and then come along and hit the bottom. Wait, this is really funny. Let me help you out a little bit there. Oh man, classic. Well, there you go. Now it's much easier for you to see at least. Away we go. Edge here, trying to match the scale there, which I think I've done pretty well. So one of the things, your body, even when it's broken, you can think of the lines crossing it and how they sort of dictate different joints to be in different places. In reality, of course, your bones don't break. In movement, they do, or they appear to. So it's important to have all of those different pieces lined out. It also means that, unfortunately, knowing how bones actually do work is really important for movement, because then you can break them in the proper and efficient sorts of ways. Ooh, funny stuff. Okay, so here, putting in a little bit of shadow, and just trying to get more and more. So this, all of our rib action is hopefully going to pay off for us over here in this vicinity. Start off with a rib there. With a rib down there, rib there, rib there, and then sort of a wall of rib there. Piece by piece. So this is supposed to be the edge of the eye, so I think. So with this crowned in there, it's all a little tricky. I've kind of goofed that section. I'm gonna keep progressing. Just keep stay put. Oh, I see. So the hand actually curves. Fantastic study if you're a paleontologist or something. Actually curves this way. Very cool. And then starts to fade in the dirt. Okay, so that's that one. That one. It's also large and intimidating. Putting a little bit of shade in between them. I'm starting to get these guys a little more sorted out. Piece by piece. Am I ever in this camera? I don't even know. It's hard to do art in this particular way, okay? I'm just doing my best. And there we go. Not bad stuff at all. And this is such a crazy bone. This is like the bone. I started by bringing it off at a bad angle, but I tried to fix it as much as I could. And then bang. So just the most remarkable bone. Gonna try and do a layer of shading later. I'm already 7 minutes in, but this is a really cool piece with really high levels of complexity and detail. Really beautiful work. Got another crazy looking bone piece over here. Now that I have this sort of worked out, I'm going to start trying to put in semblances of the spine and pelvis, which does start to go a little crazy over here. So this pelvic section, I'll try and help you out a bit. this pelvic section over here. Ooh. Oh, no, no, no. That was good. That was good. I just got distracted by the shadow. Shadows are really irritating because they disrupt the variation and length in your art. You're like, oh, I've got the angle, and then you realize you're mimicking the shadow angle as opposed to the actual angle. See, I've gotten a little cramped over here in this space, which makes sense because I rushed into it. There's some things you can do for that. That's a little trick there to try and add in a couple pieces that I know that I need. Um, but ultimately, at a certain point, you just have to commit to the actual scale that you've defined, as opposed to the scale that you're trying to copy, and that's definitely what's starting to happen to me now. This does not look like a foot, but hey, who am I to judge? These appear to me to be like random spare ribs and things, but maybe another section of pelvis here. The nature of things is getting a little confused out in this part. Okay, so I'm going to start trying to demarcate the edges of the site here. Seems to be like raised partially. That's the like information, and then there's an arrow that's pointing that way. Shoulder joint comes around like so, and then like so, and we can. Okay, so it's pretty decent basic outlines and structures now. I still got a bit of time left. I'm gonna try and go in and add some depth and some character to all of this. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take a grounded approach. I'm going to approach each of these. I'm going to try and get their shadows in. And then having hit some of the finer shadows and darker points, one under here on the chin, one under in the cheek, much neglected. That. And then behind the head, too, really distinctively, actually. Sort of lining up with the skull there. And then coming along, and we've got a shadow underneath there, and of course underneath here as well. This edge of bone should be much more cleanly defined, and now it is, and this shadow has to stop on the edge of the thingy that's there, which I decide to be right there. There we go. Now we've got a pretty strong shadow established for that, with of course more shadow over here and over here, and back over here. So with some dark highlights finally sort of cropping in. What's the next important thing? Now I'm going to try and work on some of this gentle gray that we have in between everything. It's homogeneous sort of substrate. Represent with these very equal lines. And because I have justification for each of the things that I'm doing, I'm less worried about messing something up. like, yeah, you know, obviously this is going to kind of match out because um, the plan sort of matches the canvas to some extent. It's also just good to have a plan in art, a much underappreciated aspect of the process. So here we come. Elegant, elegant, elegant. Just trying to establish the existence of different degrees of shade and color inside the art. One of the nice things about this is I can take my eyes off the reference image for a bit and just go off what I've already done. You know, some of this repetitive work can get a little tiring in art, but I think one of the tricks is to sort of alternate between doing this and the much more demanding accuracy-based work. Coming up to the end of my 15 minutes. I've already got highlights, lowlights, and a low gray in here, so I'm pretty happy. What do I want to do now? I think I probably want to try and introduce some basic shading to these bones and shapes, and that's going to simultaneously push out, interestingly enough, some of the gray that I've been putting in the middle of this stuff. Like it's gonna make that gray look lighter than I want it to be. So then I'm gonna start extending that gray a bit too, I think. All right. So stuff like that, right? And I'll just add depth and texture as we go as well. And I'm always trying to maintain as many of these nice highlights as I can. Even as I'm adding detail and shape to these objects, you gotta have the highlights remaining or things are gonna get sad. But by adding all these different lines, one of the other things that happens is you start to add this like substantial quantity of depth to your image. And that's obviously a pretty positive thing. You should start paying attention to like the actual shapes and textures in the dirt as well. You never want to like overpower your art with elements of dirt, because you still want to draw attention to the things that have that are the most important. But it is important to have that realism, and for people with a searching eye, it'll really help them out and help them focus. Actually, like, well, look at this guy, he knows what he's doing. And they'll start searching for details in other elements of your art as well. So piece by piece here, we're just trying to work things in. Just trying to depthen the color and increase the contrast. Had an opportunity to apply some of the things we learned already. It's also just important that we take the time and effort to really find and define all these edges. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah. I should think I find it probably out of time. Yeah. Well, just as I'm starting to have fun, it feels like it's probably time to try and wrap this up. How should I be proceeding here? I would continue trying to differentiate between my grays and my between my grays, really. That's kind of the stage that we're in right now. Making sure that I every now and then come back and check on my highlights and my lowlights. But really, they should kind of start taking care of themselves at this stage. As long as I don't like get too crazy with the amount of gray that I'm throwing down on this canvas, there's not a whole lot of issue that I'm ever going to run into. And forgive me for calling it a canvas too. Let's just have it. All right. I really can't I really should pull myself away. Let me see if there's any. So last thing, I'm gonna add some like vague three-dimensional shapings to this outer image. And then I'm going to try and incorporate it chromatically very quickly, like so. There's so much good stuff left for me to do on this. And that, I think, is a really big part of progressing at art, is seeing sort of all the places for improvement that you can have on any particular piece. So, when that happens, don't feel like, I must finish. Feel like instead, you're doing a great job, you're progressing, you're learning. But yeah, like the benefit of having all of this proper shading and stuff is that elements like all of these individual bones suddenly pop out so much more noticeably. And all of a sudden, details are discernible in ways that you wouldn't expect. Actually showing people detail, not just having detail, but showing people detail, is a real skill that you have to develop in art. I'm getting happier and happier with this dirt as it develops over here. To be honest, I could probably just do this forever. This is one of the things that I love the most. It's sort of just getting to relax and shred for a little bit. Getting color in the inside of that bone nice and quickly. Don't want to lose that great line, though. Some of these might be more unrealistic lines than others. At this stage, we're just trying to do our best to preserve everything that needs to be preserved. And to give everything the sort of respect and color and line and shape that it should have. Alrighty. Are there any final changes I want to make to this? I think putting in this section here over the eye, which I've basically just ignored, is really important. And then again, a few faint details on the edge here on the periphery. My nose here lost definition a little bit, but I can fix that in like 2 seconds. Boom. My shadow here isn't fantastic, but that's not the end of the world. I wouldn't mind just having a little bit more color constancy in there. And then I'm just trying to define the shape of these objects a little bit better. But that's pretty good. Bunch of different techniques on display here. Not a finished sketch by any stretch of the imagination, but very solid practice, and you can sort of see how doing these different studies can build up your skills to do even more complicated and beautiful pieces of art later on. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and do some art. Yeah, it's worth it.